गुड इवनिंग, नमस्कार, आदाब, सत श्री अकाल। आज फिर से मुलाकात है मिस संगीता बहादुर, एम्बेसडर संगीता बहादुर, जो एक फनकार हैं डिप्लोमेसी में और अदाकार हैं। कई कई तरह के अदाकार भी हैं, गीतकार भी हैं, लेखक भी हैं, और हम इनका हार्दिक स्वागत करते हैं क्योंकि आज की चर्चा है डिप्लोमेसी और आज का डिप्लोमेसी। और एक हमारे नए सज्जन आए हैं, डॉक्टर प्रोफेसर नटराजन, जो वंशस्थली के कहते हैं वाइस चांसलर हैं। और हम इनका, हाँ सर, टेल मी, डिड आई से समथिंग
No,
erroneous?
I am not vice chancellor. I am professor and head of the Department of Chemical Engineering.
Okay, former. Okay, he's head and professor of the chemical engineering department. Anyhow, sir, welcome to the show. It's been a long time since we met and we saw you, and welcome Sangeeta ji also after a visit to Europe and I think other countries. And पांडे जी, आपका भी हार्दिक स्वागत है। तो अब शुरुआत करते हैं संगीता जी आपके चर्चे पे कि what is Indian diplomacy doing and what is the future of Indian diplomacy। ये मेरी तरफ से है। बाकी इंटरैक्टिव सेशन हम दो सुनते रहेंगे। एंड आप शुरुआत कीजिए, इब्तिदा कीजिए।
Okay. As we've said earlier in various introductions, I served in the Indian Foreign Service for 35 years before I retired as High Commissioner to Malta. और उन 35 years में I saw a great deal of changes in the ministry, in the way the Foreign Office operates, in the kind of work ethics that we have, evolved into following. और बहुत कुछ changes हुए हैं इन 35 सालों में, which it's difficult to quantify. But if you've been in the ministry and you've been working as a diplomat, you can see, जैसे जब मैंने सर्विस ज्वाइन की थी 35 साल पहले, तो जो हमसे expectations थे as young diplomats and even later on when you became more senior, अब in the last, say, 7, 8 years, 10 years, that has changed tremendously, because I feel that the nature of a country's diplomacy also changes according to the place that country acquires for itself on the global stage. तो आज से 35 साल पहले, 30 साल पहले, 25 साल पहले, India was still, of course, it was a populist democracy, and we had this whole huge cultural, interest that the world took in us. And we were a democracy, and we had a big population and a big economy, except that we were somehow always missing the takeoff speed. मतलब वहां तक पहुंच के और फिर हम उससे आगे नहीं जा पा रहे थे, जो भी कारण उसका रहा हो. I don't want to, I mean, I have my own personal views, and now that I'm retired, I'm allowed to have them. But I think public forum में मैं इससे ज्यादा कुछ नहीं बोलना चाहूंगी कि जो पहले मैंने 25 साल में, अपने 25 साल के डिप्लोमेटिक करियर में जो भी देखा, हमेशा, not just me, but I think a lot of us from that generation of diplomats used to feel that we are somehow just missing the target. हम एक लेवल तक पहुंच के और उसके बाद हम उसको फर्दर नहीं लेके जा पा रहे थे, for whatever reason. तो as a result, पहले 25 साल में हमने देखा, ओके फाइन, जब इकोनॉमिक लिबरलाइजेशन वगैरह इंडिया का होने लगा, तो people started taking us a little more seriously, क्योंकि उनको लगा कि ये एक कंट्री है जो कि जिसमें पोटेंशियल है. अगर हम इसमें अभी इंटरेस्ट लेते हैं, अभी इन्वेस्ट करते हैं, तो आगे चल के हमें फायदा हो सकता है. तो to some extent that feeling had started coming, which was not there, let me tell you, when I started my career as a diplomat in 1987, because एक छोटा सा एग्जाम्पल जैसे मैं देना चाहूँ अगर, तो मेरी पहली पोस्टिंग स्पेन में थी, और आई वाज, बिकॉज हमारा ये सिस्टम होता है कि व्हेन यू जॉइन द सर्विस you are allocated one particular foreign language which you're supposed to learn, and then you're given a certain amount of time to learn that language well enough to appear for an examination and to clear it. And it's only after you clear that language examination that you're confirmed in service. तो मुझे स्पेनिश allocate हुआ था, or my first posting was in Spain and Madrid. And I mean, of course, like as a young diplomat, I had a lot of fun. It's a beautiful country to be in. People are amazing. And, I made some very good friends. I had a great time. It's a beautiful country, lovely culture, everything. But I was, in fact, that was the first time I had actually stepped out of India to live, at least. And you could make out कि इतनी बड़ी कंट्री जो हमारी थी और है, उसका कितना छोटा सा इम्पैक्ट था उस टाइम लोगों के ऊपर. अब जैसे जब when you spoke about to anybody and they'd ask you, okay, where are you from, which country and all that, and you'd say, like, once I remember having this conversation with a petrol station attendant, and he asked me, where are you from? You look very Spanish, but you obviously, Spanish is not your first language. Where are you from? So I told him I'm Indian. And he said, yes, of course. You are the people who dance around fires with feathers in their hair. And, so he was confusing us for Red Indians. The awareness about India was so little. The only thing they would know most of the time would be, oh, yeah, Taj Mahal, because the Spanish pronounced J as her. So Taj Mahal, Rajiv Gandhi, Indira Gandhi, that was about, the limit of their knowledge about India. So since they knew so little about us, and we were regarded as one of those, third world countries where nothing much was ever going to change. And so there was a lot of a very patronizing attitude towards us. We were not taken seriously as a great power, and as any kind of power, to tell you the truth. So we were just like these morally superior culture, which would pass these strictures in the UN and talk about, how countries should be behaving and why you should not be getting into fights with each other. Why? So it was a lot of, we tried to exert a lot of moral authority at that time because we had very little else to offer. And that's my very, honest view about this. And then came the liberalization, and then, as I said, people started taking us more seriously because it was a growing economy, and they realized that, okay, this is something that we need to keep in mind when we are dealing with India. But plus, the biggest middle class in the world, and the purchasing power, and this, that, and the other. So because of that, there was renewed interest in India on all aspects. What we were doing, what we were thinking, our cultural background, our history, our architecture, all this suddenly became more interesting to the world. And then suddenly, you had this crop of writers as well, who became international celebrities. So literature also, literature coming out of India found a place of honor. And, we won a lot of awards then, so everything began to change at that time. Lekin us waqt bhi, unfortunately, we had this very, I would call it a defensive attitude कि, हमारे खुद के बहुत प्रॉब्लम्स हैं भाई, हम और किसी चीज में इन्वॉल्व नहीं होना चाहते. I actually remember one of the foreign secretaries, one of my favorite foreign secretaries, to tell you the truth, because he was so good looking. I was like totally fida over him, and also a very good officer and all that, but I won't name him. But this was like several years ago while I was still, a relatively young officer. And he was talking we have this concept of the Foreign Service, group which comes together every few months, and the foreign secretary would, all of us who were posted in headquarters, तो सबसे वो बात करते हैं या करती हैं, and they talk about what our vision is, what our views are, where we are going, where we are coming from, etc. तो मुझे याद है कि उन्होंने उस समय काफी कुछ हो रहा था दुनिया में, जो कि हमेशा ही होता है, but in that particular year a lot of stuff was happening. And one of the younger officers asked him why India was not taking a more active stance, a more active participation in what was happening in the world at that time, because the officer rightly said that we are a big country, we are a democracy, we have a growing economy, we have a growing status. So why can't we take, intervene more effectively? हम क्यों हमेशा sidelines पे खड़े रहते हैं? And I still remember his answer, which really took me aback. He said, look, whatever you say, we are still a poor country. We have a lot of problems of our own. Let us solve our own problems first. Let the world deal with its problems by itself. We have better things to do. That was the attitude which had been going on, carrying on, I think, ever since we became independent. Of course, there was a time when we formed the non-aligned movement and various other things like that, where we sort of tried to give a different direction to the world, but it was all, as I said, more moralistic than practical. लेकिन ये जो defensiveness हमारी जो थी कि हम जो भी है, we are a big country, हमारी economy भी ठीक चल रही है, सब कुछ है, लेकिन somehow the feeling was कि हमारे खुद के इतने problems हैं, we are not really in a position to help the rest of the world. And I found it very disturbing, because I thought that if that is the kind of thinking that is going on at the highest level in the ministry, तो फिर I don't know, because if you want to become a great power, if you want to become a recognized entity on the global stage, you have to first take yourself seriously before others can take you seriously. तो अगर आप खुद ही ये मानने को तैयार नहीं है कि आप में ये capability है कि you can shape the events that are happening in the world, that you can intervene in any effective and positive manner, then अगर आप खुद को great power नहीं समझेंगे तो कोई और भी नहीं समझेगा, right? तो ये उस समय, मतलब, and I'm talking about maybe as late as maybe 15-16 years ago, not very long ago either. तो उस समय तक ये हमारा thought process था. लेकिन अभी पिछले 9-10 साल में there has been a tremendous change in that, because suddenly it's like, वो कहते हैं ना, हनुमान जी की कहानी होती है कि उनको एक श्राप मिला था कि वो अपना पावर तब तक भूले रहेंगे जब तक कोई और उनको याद नहीं दिलाएगा, right? And once he was reminded and he remembered, then of course he became a superhuman, superhero, that kind of a thing. तो हमारे साथ वही दिक्कत थी, क्योंकि हमको भी कहीं से श्राप मिला हुआ था कि you will not recognize your own power, your own capacity, your own capability of influencing the world order around you till you are reminded again and again. And that is what has happened in the last 10 years. We have somehow been reminded that we were a sleeping tiger. It's time to wake up and shake the world. And that's what we've been doing, because I have seen, how my ambassadors, when I was a young officer, how they were treated by their host countries politely enough, but never with that kind of seriousness. And you never had that kind of clout either, till the time when I myself became ambassador, and, my batchmates and people, a couple of batches, senior, junior, etc. And everybody would tell you how the entire perception had changed by then. We would, like, I was posted, like in East Europe, I was posted in EU, wherever. Like suddenly it was like, if you were the Indian ambassador, you will get your meetings, you will get a hearing, people take you seriously, people will actually ask you for help on certain matters and things like that. So very often I and others as well, I'm sure, would be summoned to the Foreign Office to say, look, we are having this problem, can you help? And most of the time you'd say yes, because you knew that the government was standing behind you, and that if you took up something with the establishment here, things would happen, things would move. तो जब हमने खुद को seriously लेना शुरू किया, तो दुनिया ने भी हमें seriously लेना शुरू किया. And I think that is, where our diplomacy is now headed. क्योंकि बहुत सारी, up now you'll see, for example, even in the UN, very often you'll find even a junior most officers posted there standing up and giving it left, right, and center to, whoever, whether it's Pakistan or whether it's Turkey or whether it's whoever. So ये confidence जो हमको आया है ना, ये बहुत जरूरी था. और अब I think after this, now that we have tasted blood, so to say, there will be no going back. So we have arrived, we have come to stay.
Wonderful, wonderful. Perhaps Dr. Natarajan?
Dr. Natarajan, I would like to first say to you that, hello, Dr. Natarajan, before you speak, I would just like to tell you that there was a time when my parents were very keen on sending me to Vanastali to study. Not chemical engineering, no, because I've never been inclined towards science. Maybe I just didn't have good teachers. But we had all heard so much about the institution and how it was one of the best in India, etc. So I missed it by a hair's breadth. So nice to meet you today.
We missed having a alumni like you.
I'm sure you have many other brilliant ones who come out of
That's okay, but I found that some of your friends are also my close friends. Padma Kari has been my student at BIT Pilani where I taught.
Oh.
Padma Kari.
Okay.
She's there in IFS.
Yeah.
The book writer Vikram Sampath also has been my student at BIT Pilani.
Ah, okay. Wow. Okay.
And I think that Bharatanatyam dancer Arupa Lahiri came and did a Speak Mac program in Bilwara in my university. So I met her. So I realized that even though we haven't met, we have a lot of mutual friends.
We have a lot of friends in common. That's right. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
See, a few things I want to curiosity is not a question just out of curiosity. Everybody says that Chanakya has written Arthashastra and whole lot of paras on diplomacy. In IFS, do they give a orientation on Chanakya's theory and ask the diplomat to follow the Chanakya principles or something?
Unfortunately, Dr. Natarajan, I'm very sorry to say that so far I don't know if they've introduced it in the last few years, but till the time I kept track, and I was also a part of the faculty at the Foreign Service Institute. Till then, no. Unfortunately, we were not, we were not teaching our young diplomats anything along those lines. But the good part was that, we have at the Foreign Service Institute, we have a lot of training programs, right? So it's for our diplomats as well, young diplomats who are just joining. Plus, you have, midterm training programs for more senior diplomats. Then you also have a lot of training programs for foreign diplomats. So for them, yes, Chanakya was something that they were told about, they were given the basics, etc. But you are very right that it is our diplomats who need it more than them. For them, it's more of a curiosity. You're right. Okay. But so far, I mean, at least till 8-9 years ago when I was there, no. That was unfortunately not the case.
No, but
yeah, I'm going to recommend that if I can.
Okay, because I found that he has proposed 6 principles, Chanakya, which deals with what everybody has been doing. When to go for peace, when to go for war, when to stay neutral, and when to flex your muscles, and when to go for an alliance, and when to do double talk. That is fight with one and do peace with another.
Absolutely, absolutely, because he's a
So
great
I
strategist.
thought, no, in the grooming of the diplomat, some of these would have been highlighted. See, I
Yeah.
only looked at it from academic point of view because everyone talks about Chanakya, Arthasastra and all. I was wondering whether it is all put into use at any point of time in diplomacy, etc. Okay.
It probably is, but on a more personal level. Like if you, an individual diplomat, you want to read up on Chanakya and you want to, like, for example, I have not heard our current EM speaking about Chanakya that much, but he does say that he keeps reading the Mahabharata again and again, and he gets a lot of his philosophy and his ideas, etc., from there. So,
Okay.
but yes, you're so right that Chanakya's Arthashastra ought to be very much a part of the syllabus for a diplomatic academy.
Because see, they are insisting on learning a foreign language. That's
Yeah.
good, but this should not be ignored.
Yeah, yeah.
Sir.
And why do you think, doesn't it connect with what I was saying? That we have never really taken ourselves seriously enough. It's only now starting. So now we are trying to probably connect with our own history, our own intellectual, philosophies, etc. So now is the time that we should actually start talking about these things to at least to our young diplomats, and groom them in the way that our ancients thought about foreign policy. And as you rightly said, Chanakya is, I have in fact just been reading his Arthashastra for another purpose, because I also do lectures, etc., for various universities now as a
Yeah,
guest.
I saw you had recently given at Kaziranga University.
That's right. So
Yes.
they wanted me to do a lecture on management according to Chanakya. So I read the Arthashastra for that. Foreign policy, unfortunately, unless you are talking to international affairs, international studies students, probably it's too complicated for the others. So, but management is something that everyone wants to do. They all want to earn money, and so virtually every university has a management wing faculty. So that is something. So in that context, I also read about what he says about foreign policy, and you are very right. It's an amazing mind. It's an amazing way of looking at the world. Very unique and very, I would say, very relevant even to this day and our diplomacy now.
Okay. And of course, I don't qualify as a diplomat because there are a lot of jokes about diplomacy. They say a diplomat
is a person who lies abroad for his country.
Yes.
No. The other interesting one is diplomat will remember woman's birthday, but not her age.
Very true. Very true. And another one says something like, a diplomat is a person who can convince his wife that she looks ugly in diamonds. So, yeah.
And see, one more thing out of curiosity is, there is always a belief in public that only guys and girls who study in St. Stephen's, Xavier, you are also from Sophia College, I think. Only those high-sounding, Christian institutions, they end up with IFS, etc., and not those who study from, some of these, Goyal College or Agarwal College or Goyal College. Is it so? That, they also say IFS is meant for those tongue-twisting snobs and partying people, not for normal guys.
Do I come across as a tongue-twisting snob? Hopefully not.
No.
So, that was probably true till I would say the 70s. Because 70s, even early 80s, because the whole pattern of the examination was such that unless you'd been educated in English medium and you had come from, you know, a particular kind of a background, it would be very tough for you to crack those exams. Things
Okay.
started changing in, I think, around 83, 84, when the examination pattern was changed. And a lot of people from, you know, different, from Mufassil kind of backgrounds, small towns, etc., they started coming in. But even then, I would say till maybe till the end of the 90s or even early 2000s, foreign service was, yes, it was the domain mostly of those of us who, you know, who came from a particular kind of background, who could speak English fluently, who had, you know, who had that kind of social exposure. And I'm not saying that it was only because the authorities expected that. In fact, you would, you know, when I joined service, at that time, I realized that a lot of my batchmates and other services had not even opted for foreign service. They had a high rank high enough to have gotten if they wanted, but they didn't want to do that because of various issues. One, you know, it was like my father also told me at that time when I was opting for foreign service, he said, you know, whatever it is, but jungle mein mor nacha kisne dekha. Like today, if you are, you know, DM in you know, like Ratnagiri in Maharashtra, I was getting Maharashtra cadre, which was my cadre. And he said, yeah, so I can tell people, meri beti wahan DM hai. If you are second secretary in Ghana, who cares? You know? So do you really want to do this? So there was this recognition factor, which, you know, which discouraged a lot of people who would otherwise have qualified from even applying for that. Two, there was this kind of, I wouldn't say fear, but a kind of wariness where they thought that, you know, maybe they would not be able to adjust to a life outside India. Like again, you know, to just give you an example, one of my father's friends, my father was in income tax, and his colleagues, many of them, in fact, tried to actively discourage me from joining the foreign service at that time. And one of them said that, you know, मुझे पता नहीं how you think about these things, लेकिन बहुत लोग ऐसे होते हैं जो अपनी मिट्टी की खुशबू के बिना खुश नहीं रह सकते.
वाह वाह वाह.
तो वो भी एक फीलिंग थी कि you know, बाहर जाके how will you live, what kind of a life, because हमारा exposure भी तो बहुत कम था ना उस time पे, because social media was not there. You know, the kind of information we can get on internet these days was not there. So there were a lot of very conflicting, confusing, you know, kind of things available to you through people who had lived abroad or who were living abroad, etc., etc. And a lot of people were very wary of doing that. And the third factor, I must mention this, especially for the men, was that if you joined the foreign service, daheja acha nahi milta tha. You get a nice educated wife, but dowry wise, you were like the pits, you know, because people were willing to pay any kind of crazy sum to a son-in-law who was in the IPS, and even more so in income tax. That was the highest paid damad you could ever have. But if you joined the foreign service, then all you could hope for was a good girl, you know, who was educated, who was confident, who would, you know, who would not mind going abroad to live. But there was nothing you could do for your family, for her family, for your friends, etc. तो इसलिए भी लोगों को लगता था कि फिर क्यों time बर्बाद किया, you know, that kind of a thing. So that was one reason. But, you know, as I said, things have been changing over the years. And since I was in the Foreign Service Institute as faculty for almost 3 years, so I saw like 3.5 batches come and go. And things are very different now. In fact, you know, and the batches also became much bigger because, you know, as our presence on the international stage is increasing, the number of diplomats we are intaking every year has also grown. Like at my time, each batch had barely either 10 to 12 people. Some batches had even fewer. So mine was 12, for example. So ab jo hai, like in those 3 years that I was there, most batches were 35 plus, 35, 40, sometimes even 42. So ab itne sare log, and most of them had come from small towns, even villages, and the kind of universities and colleges that you were talking about, Professor Natarajan. And you realize that, and in fact, I wouldn't say majority, but I would say at least 20-25% of them were not comfortable speaking English, were not comfortable in a setup where they were supposed to hold a wine glass, or they were supposed to eat dinner with fork and knife, and they didn't know which glass to use for what. They didn't know. So, तो ऐसे लोग अब आना शुरू हो गए हैं. And the attempt now is to take them as, अनगढ़ मिट्टी जिसको बोलते हैं ना, उसको लेके और उससे हम कुछ ऐसा बनाएं जो कि हम जिसके साथ काम कर सके. तो it's not like कि अब वो concept है that only if you are you've been educated in English medium institutions, you come from Stephens or Hindu college or whatever. Oh, आपने सुफाया की बात की, my college. I must tell you a very funny incident. I know that you thought it is a very, very elite college, and it is. But Bombay में है, दिल्ली वालों को उसका पता नहीं. तो I remember जब हम शुरू में ना पहले साल में you have to do a lot of activities, in the sense that quite apart from the training you get in the institute itself, you're taken on Bharat Darshan, you're taken on military attachment, all kinds of things. So Bharat Darshan pe, we only 12 of us, so we were divided into two groups. So one group went to Kolkata, Northeast, and then the plan was to go to Andamans. And the other group, I don't remember where. Those were the 2 or 3 married professionals who were, traveling with their wives. But for the rest of us, we were all in this group. So we went and we saw the Northeast and everything. Then we came back to Kolkata, and we were trying to get to the Andamans. And twice, the first time we had to come back midway because one of the engines of the aircraft failed. The second time, the weather got so bad that we had to return. So then we had to finally give up on the idea of going to the Andamans. Now we are stuck in Kolkata, don't know what to do. Paise वैसे भी नहीं थे, because we had been given a limited sum of money, for because the ministry had made all the arrangements for hotel and all. Kolkata में अब हम क्या करें? So being probationers, and you are like, at that time you think you're kings, you've just joined the foreign service, and you are like all, खूब खुश होके, and we are, the cats whiskers, ऐसी feeling होती है. तो हमने सोचा कि ऐसे करते हैं, यहाँ के चीफ सेक्रेटरी से बात करते हैं, उनको बोलते हैं please arrange for something. So imagine IFS probationers, we just called up his office and we said, we IFS probationers 87 batch, we are stuck in Kolkata. Sir को बोलो कि हमारे लिए अच्छा सा एक accommodation arrange करें, because now we are forced to stay here for whatever 2-3 days, जब तक हमारी return flight नहीं है. तो अब when I think about it, I'm like, oh God, ये क्या बेवकूफी. But at that time it was very normal. So and he was very sweet, the chief secretary, and he said, yeah, sure, we'll do whatever. And he said, come and meet me, have a cup of tea, I'd love to see you, talk to you and all that. So whatever, 4 or 5 of us who were there, we went and met him. I was the only girl. The others were, like, I think there were 4 or 5 of my batchmates plus me. And so we started chatting and we talked about various things. And then he started asking all of us our backgrounds, where are you from? So one of my batchmates says, I am Ahmedabad. Another one says IIT Kanpur. Then somebody else says from Stephens. Somebody says from... Then he turned to me and he said, and you, young lady, where did you study? So I said, Sophia, Bombay. So he just looks at me for a minute and he says, never heard of it. And then he lost all interest. I was greatly insulted.
Exactly.
Whatever. तो अब वो जो था, जो जैसे आप कह रहे थे नटराजन साहब, that that thing about you could be a diplomat only if you came from Stephens or you came from IIT or you came from IM and blah, 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 and you came from Bombay or Delhi or one of these big cities, Chennai or something. That's no longer there. That's no longer there.
Okay.
Everybody who can get enough marks and who opts for the foreign service is entitled to get in. And somehow we try to train them in a way. Although I must say, personally, I feel कि ये जो है ना, this thing about English not being essential or vital, that might be okay to some extent. But you know, when you're interacting with people abroad, you find that almost all diplomats everywhere, whichever country they come from, one of the languages they speak is English. So at least, you know, if you don't know the local language or you don't know their language, it's easy for you to interact with them if you speak the lingo, right? So wo nahi hai to, and English is one language which I think is very hard to learn when you're older, you know, because it's such an illogical language, I would say. तो है ना, तो जब आप adulthood में उसको सीखने की कोशिश करते हैं, सीख तो जाते हैं, but you're never so confident and so you know, it's not so easy to express yourself. तो वो मुझे लगता है थोड़ा सा handicap है. In fact, there were years in which the majority of the probationers or officer trainees, as they're now called, who joined the service was so poor in English that we actually had to arrange for English classes for them. And then the ones who needed those classes most were the most arrogant. And they said, "Hame nahi karna," you know. So it became a struggle, tussle between the faculty and these probationers. कि हम चाहते थे वो सीख जाए, and it's for their benefit, you know. लेकिन उनका था हमें नहीं सीखना. Because, you know, now we've cleared the exam, what the hell do we care? कैसे? तो ये attitude भी ठीक नहीं है. But as I said, अब वो बात नहीं रही पहले वाली. वो नेहरू के टाइम में जो होता था कि unless you speak English with a British accent and you come from this family or you come from this university or this college or whatever, and you have a particular kind of background, वो सब doesn't matter anymore.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Maybe they should make sign language universal for all diplomats. So that it doesn't matter what language you speak.
That's
you
right.
know how to tell that you know what you want to say. Like
that's true. For deaf and dumb wali jo sign language, that'll be ideal actually. But एक बात मैंने और notice की that you know we confine ourselves to just one foreign language. In the sense, English is not regarded as a foreign language for us. तो वो तो हम most of us do speak. लेकिन एक foreign language पे हम concentrate करते हैं. Most other diplomats from other countries, I've seen they speak a minimum of 3 to 4 foreign languages. But that makes life very easy for them, particularly those who then go on to multilateral diplomacy like UN में या EU में, any of them, talk to any of them, minimum 3 languages, mostly 4 or 5. So मुझे लगता है कि that is also something that you know, we ought to be emphasizing now with our expanding role. और हमें कोशिश करनी चाहिए कि अभी जितना हमारे diplomats 2 foreign languages या कुछ लोग खुद सीख लेते हैं तो 3 हो जाता है, but on an official basis, I think we should you know, encourage or rather make it compulsory. जैसे अभी only 1 foreign language is compulsory. Let's make it 2. You know, apart from English, तो कम से कम 3 तो हो, because it makes your job so much easier. I have realized that when I'm posted, say, in a Spanish-speaking country where I speak the language, it's so much easier for me to interact with not just the officers in the government and the ministers and all that, but also with the people in the streets, you know, and that is so useful because you get so much more information and ideas that way than you do only speaking to bureaucrats and to you know, to politicians, etc. Whereas if I'm posted, for example, when I was ambassador to Belarus, I don't speak Russian. I tried to learn, but it's a bloody tough language. So
I know.
tried for a couple of months. Then I said, "Na mere paas time hai, na itna mental space hai, nahi karna mujhe." And at that level, because you always have, you know, an interpreter with you or whatever, so you tend to rely on them. लेकिन उससे क्या होता है कि communication becomes slower, more difficult, and the nuances are lost. तो ये मेरे ख्याल से बहुत जरूरी है.
No, that 1-to-1 bonding doesn't happen.
Doesn't happen. You're so
when
right.
you speak You see, when you go and speak in Bengali to a Bengali, the guy gets kicked like
Absolutely,
he
absolutely.
treats you like your own family member.
Yeah, absolutely. So ये बहुत
Okay.
जरूरी है, बहुत ही जरूरी है.
Such a
And
wonderful.
I think for making a diplomat, of course, no one better than you can tell that. Whole lot of soft skills go in building a diplomat.
Absolutely.
Do you go through any special soft skill session on
Yes.
empathy, negotiation, public
Yes.
speaking,
Yes.
leadership,
वो
what is
करते हैं.
that, time management? So all this conflict resolution and diplomat work under stress management, and
Yes,
what else?
these things we do. Thankfully,
Yes.
again,
And-
that's something that has started recently. हमारे time पे नहीं होता था ये सब. To be very
and persuasion,
हाँ,
because most of the problems come when you cannot convince the other person. Persuasion is a very important soft skill. How do you cajole the other fellow to fall in your line of thinking?
absolutely, absolutely. So for my generation of diplomats, most of us would pick it up as we went along because
Yes.
learn by making mistakes and then rectifying. Lekin I think thankfully now we actually address these issues, not just with the young officers, but even the more senior lot who might have joined at a time when all these things were not taught at that level. तो अब हमारी जो midterm training programs वगैरह होते हैं, a lot of emphasis is laid on leadership, on time management, on stress management, on negotiations, on how to persuade the other party, as you were saying, to see things from your perspective.
No, adaptability. How do you think adapting yourself to a new culture, that itself is a soft skill.
That
If
is
you
a
are-
soft skill.
if-
And you are
if you
so
are-
right, Professor,
Yes.
because I have seen, from the time when I joined service, from my seniors, from my juniors, even now to many of them, you realize how much like a fish out of water they feel when they're posted abroad, and that's because of that closed mindset. You think, many of us, unfortunately, still, like in the back of our minds, we have this feeling that we are the most superior culture, we are the most superior history, and we are such an ancient civilization, etc. तो हमें क्या सीखना दूसरे से, so that condescension very often comes across, and then you have already closed your, several doors and windows of communication with that country and with that culture. So ये तो होता ही है. Plus, if you're not culturally sensitive, then you also tend to make a lot of mistakes which are totally avoidable. So many things. Of course, you can't know everything about the country you've been to, but basic politeness, basic courtesies, all of these really need to, and especially, very often in my postings, I have been asked by my local staff, and I was so ashamed when they said things like that. They said, don't Indians ever thank anyone? Don't they ever say please?
Yes.
And you realize that's true for so many of us. Somehow, you have this thing about, अरे ठीक है यार, this is something I deserve. उसने कर दिया तो क्या हो गया? So but when in most countries, even the smallest thing you do for them, they'll say thank you so much, or they, we really appreciate it, we are grateful for this, whatever. They'll always, say please when they're asking you to do something. They'll always do certain things which are just basic politeness, which unfortunately a lot of Indians, at least at that time, I'm sure it continues even now. And that's another problem that we are facing with, as we were discussing about, people coming from these small town village backgrounds, from different kinds of educational backgrounds, etc. Many, not their fault, but they've just not been exposed to this, तो वो हमको remedy करना पड़ रहा है और करते हैं. But unfortunately for the more senior lot, many of them have never been trained in this, and they've not even, picked up these basic things as they went along for whatever reason. either they were simply closed off culturally, mentally, emotionally, जो भी reason है. But इस तरह की बहुत, otherwise there are things that you just, you know, like they're very specific to a particular country, which may not, you know, वहां पे बहुत जरूरत है, कहीं और आप posted हो नहीं जरूरत होगी. So those things you just learn, and everybody knows, okay, this is specific to my country, so this person doesn't know, and they forgive you very easily. But thank you, please, how are you? These kind of things, you know, ये तो हर जगह होता है, हर जगह होता है. And if you're unable to you know, like do these basic gestures of courtesy, I would say. अब कहीं आप गए हो, you've been called for dinner or whatever. If you don't take a hostess gift, if you don't take at least a bouquet of flowers or a bottle of wine, मतलब बहुत लोग करते हैं, ऐसे ही उठा के चले आएंगे. तो they won't say anything, but it's sort of, you know, कैसे लोग हैं यार, you know, is that kind of a thing that comes across.
Yeah.
तो बहुत ये बहुत जरूरी है. These soft skills are very, very essential. The fact that you know, like if you're inviting people home, how to treat them, how to make them feel welcome, how to be a good host. आप हो सकता है आप ना पीते हो, maybe you're a teetotaler, but the fact is that most other people would want a drink or two. So what kind of bar to maintain, how to offer them, किस तरह का खाना उनको serve करो. आप अपना Indian खाना ही हम serve करते हैं normally, वो भी कर रहे हो, तुमको कैसे समझाओ कि उनको अच्छा लगे, and they feel interested कि अच्छा this is what they're serving, this is, तो इस तरह की बातें. Then enough knowledge about your own culture to be able to hold a conversation other than just work conversation. Work conversation तो होता ही है, but what makes you an interesting person, an interesting diplomat, are the extracurricular things you can talk about. If you can talk about music, you can talk about literature, you can talk about films, you can talk about architecture, whatever your field of you know, of interest. But this is what I used to tell all the trainees who I mentored while I was there for 3 years, कि ये बहुत जरूरी है, because you realize at some stage that without these soft skills, without this kind of information and knowledge about something, even if it's something very trivial, but have something that you can talk to people about other than मेरी हम दोनों की countries का relation कैसा है, दुनिया में क्या होता है, that is तो your job ना. लेकिन उसके आगे बढ़ के भी आपको कुछ तो उसको लगना चाहिए कि this person has some depth, that he or she is worth speaking to, and that when I meet her or him, it leaves me feeling a little more enriched, a little more knowledgeable about something, a little more interested in something other than dry diplomacy. So ये बहुत जरूरी है. And these are things, as you said,
I would like to share something with you, Sangeeta ji.
Yeah.
Yeah, now you're talking about this.
Anna,
let me share my
Anna, may I interject?
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Whenever possible, try to have one talk show in Vanasali of.
Yeah, definitely. I was about to say that.
Talk show of Sangeeta Bahadur in your university.
Definitely.
Oh, I would love to come. I would love to come in. As I said, I almost missed being, you know.
Yeah. I'll fill up the gap. Don't worry.
Yeah, please organize that.
Yeah.
And it will be a very good thing that you will be able to.
Sangeeta, you are located where? At Delhi or where?
Yeah, I'm in Noida. So Delhi NCR, yes.
Wonderful.
We're not too far.
Wonderful. And
not too far.
And
4 hours.
See, the present trend is that more people are opting for IFS than IAS. IAS has become the second priority, unlike the previous days where everybody wanted to be IAS and dowry loaded. But now I think more youngsters are opting for IFS first, and only if they don't get IFS, they are taking IAS. This is my observation.
There is a certain percentage of people who's coming back. If you probably remember in the, in the early days after the Foreign Service, Indian Foreign Service was set up, IFS was the premium service, and Nehru, I believe, used to handpick people, because even if your rank was very high, he didn't like you for whatever reason, you would not be offered the service, right? तो ये पहले 10-15 साल 20 साल शायद ऐसा चला था, and then suddenly, as I said, when the examination system was changed and the syllabus was changed and the kind of people who started taking the exams completely changed, तो उस समय ये बिल्कुल उल्टा हो गया था, for the reasons we talked about earlier. Now, I think with more awareness, with more exposure to what's happening in the world, I think people are again sort of finding it interesting to join a service like this, which gives you a lot of exposure, which gives you a kind of a life out of the ordinary, as they say in the Indian Air Force. So that is very much there, but abhi bhi there are lots of people who prefer IFS. In fact, some of my batchmates' children who qualified the civil services, so they all know me, and they know how much I've enjoyed my stint in the Foreign Service. But ये सब के बाद भी उन्होंने IS के लिए opt किया, for the same reasons कि हमें बाहर नहीं जाना, or maybe dowry is not such a big thing anymore, but this fact that you can do things for your friends and family and all. So ये सब आप foreign service में, apart from visa, passport, maybe someone who's who's caught abroad and in some difficulty, you can help them out. But apart from that, कुछ खास personal level पे हम लोगों के लिए नहीं कर पाते. तो ऐसे लोग हैं whose mindset is still the same, कि चाहे जो भी हो. अच्छा, दूसरी बात जिससे ये फर्क पड़ा है, more people becoming attracted to the foreign service now as compared to say 15 years ago or 20 years ago, is also the fact that the foreign allowance, as we call it, which is the additional salary that you're paid to make life easier for you abroad, has really gone up. So earlier, मुझे याद है, when I was in school, I had a schoolmate. I think we were in 10th at that time. So she was my namesake also called Sangeeta. And her dad was, I don't know if he was in the foreign service, but he was definitely in the ministry. And he was at that time posted abroad somewhere, I think London, yeah, pata nahi kahan, somewhere in Europe. And so we used to be all like, wow, kya, and the children used to study in India, and the parents were at the posting. And I remember asking her, no, in fact, I met her father once, and I asked him, uncle, why are they studying here? Why don't you take them along? And he said, beta, we can't afford it. Because, at that time, not only was your foreign allowance much smaller, in fact, people used to say, ki agar, you use up everything just to make the two ends meet, that kind of thing. So you can't afford to go to a play, you can't afford to go for a holiday or whatever. So ye halat thi. And plus, like no education allowance, nothing, medical allowance bhi nahi milta tha. So all you were given was a house to stay in, and that foreign allowance, jo ki was supposed to cover everything. Now, in the late 80s, I think, fortunately, we had some very good officers in MEA who were running the administration and the financial department. And unhone kaise karke lad jhagad ke, they got the finance ministry to finally agree, one, to enhance the foreign allowance substantially, linking it to the International Living Index. Two, they got them to agree to giving children's education allowance, so that the government took care of, the entire fee structure. You didn't have to worry about that. So international school mein tumhare bacche padhenge, government will take care of everything. Of course, bus fare and all we are supposed to pay, but everything else was medical. Whatever happens to you while you're abroad, everything is, the government's concern. So suddenly you find that your life is so much better. Because
you better work better,
much better, and you can live comfortably without having to resort to any hanky-panky. No under the table income is required. Unless, of course, you want to live like Ambani, that's a different thing. But otherwise, like if you want to live a very comfortable life and also, save some money and all for your retirement, now it's like very easy to do that. So I think that has also been something that has encouraged people to look at the service as a practical option. Because pehle you joined only because you loved the idea. Like for me, as I think I've said in some other show as well, mera pehla pyar tha air hostess banna. Okay. Seriously. So when I was in college and then even in university, I was like, mujhe to air hostess banna, I don't want to do anything else. Yeah, and my parents were so upset about it, and my dad was like, "Are you crazy? Like, no daughter of mine is going to become a glorified air hostess." All kinds of stuff. So, glorified waitress, not air hostess. So he was very upset with me, and this I'm talking about when I was doing my first year of postgrad. And so we were, in fact, we fought so much about it that I was not talking to them. They were not talking to me. It was like real Cold War going on at home. So fortunately for me, my dad's best friend from his college days dropped in to Bombay and he stayed with us for a few days because he had some work. So he noticed ki kya ho raha hai? Nobody talking to each other. So he asked my dad, he said, "What's happening? How come like all these cold vibes? Tum log ek dusre se baat nahi karo?" And my dad was like, "Samjhao isko, the stupid girl, post-graduation kar rahi hai and she wants to go and become an air hostess. What's wrong with her?" So he had the good sense to ask me, "Kyun? Why? Why do you want to become an air hostess?" So I told him, "Because I want to travel the world." So he said, "Great, then do it in style. Join the foreign service." And I was like, "Really? Aisa bhi kuch hota hai?" I had no idea. Despite the fact that my dad was in income tax, but foreign service was such an ivory tower at that time, that I didn't know that a service like that existed. I didn't know there was something called a diplomat. I didn't know that you had, you could be posted abroad in embassies and all. So I was like, wow, ye to bada acha idea hai. So that is when I changed my mind and decided ki chalo ye karte hain. Right? So, ये बहुत सारी चीजें familiarity भी बढ़ गई है. More and more people are, because the role of the foreign office has expanded so much. So like earlier we used to be just like a post office, ये ministry से ये खबर आई, embassy को बता दो, embassy से ये खबर आई, वो ministry को पहुंचा दो. That is mostly what we used to do. Now suddenly we are part of the policy making, we are part of the decision making. In many cases, we are the leading party, So hum batate hain, we set the agenda. Ye karna hai, this is what we are trying to achieve with this country or with this region or with this international multilateral organization or whatever. Now you tell us how we can go about it. Then all the other ministries give their input. So suddenly your entire status in government has changed. And we become much more visible. And to a large extent, I would also compliment Sushma Swaraj ji for this, because she was the one who decided that an Indian's life is not cheap. Agar koi Indian kahin pareshani mein hai, anything is happening, we have to, as a government, step in, help them, extricate them, do whatever we can to save their lives, save their livelihood, save their, their families, jo bhi hai. So she was the one who set this trend in motion, and suddenly we were in the news. Oh, यहाँ पे ये हुआ था, तो ऐसा किया, एमी ने ऐसे किया, स्पेशल प्लेन भेजा, स्पेशल रेस्क्यू भेजी, ये किया, वो किया. तो from a time when somebody like me, from an educated government background family, did not even know that something like the Foreign Office existed, the IFS existed, to a time when most people know that there are people called diplomats. There is the Foreign Office which deals with, bilateral issues and deals with Indians living abroad. So suddenly ये बहुत सारा spotlight आ गया हमारे ऊपर. तो इसलिए भी I think, a lot of people were influenced by that as well. So ये 2-3 factors I would say which have been crucial in bringing the ranking of the foreign service up again.
Yeah, definitely. Orlovsky and Machiavelli का concept चला गया.
In a lighter vein,
हाँ
In a lighter vein, if
जी
Sangeeta had become an air hostess, some Bollywood director would have offered you a flying in the
role.
plane would have offered you a heroine role, and you would
Yes.
have entered Bollywood.
Absolutely. Or I could have married some superstar and become, one of those Bollywood wives, which would have been such fun. But
संगीता जी,
Really,
huh,
I
संगीता
think, I
जी,
think, I think
दो मिनट
we are
2 मिनट दे दीजिए,
overdue to
2 मिनट
end
दे
the
देंगे,
session.
2 मिनट दे देंगे, 20
So,
सेकेंड, 20 सेकेंड.
hello.
with your due permission, if you people give me your due permission, uh, I will end the recording.
एक सेकेंड, वो अली भाई कुछ बोल रहे हैं, उनको 2 मिनट चाहिए,
हाँ,
बोलेंगे
बोलिए,
क्या?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
सुनते ही
Please,
नहीं
please,
मेरी.
let her complete. Yeah.
Now let me complete. Now she was talking about grooming and how to eat and how to greet people. Now I was in such a situation in Shantong. I was there with a group of engineers from India Bulls, and some of them were from IIT Kharagpur, IIT Roorkee, and etc. Now we were invited for a banquet, and being in communications, the Chinese served the best in their restaurant, in their well, it was brinjal aubergine with shrimps. hmm. And when the tray, when the they have this round table, it came to our friend there. He said, "क्या है?" मैंने कहा बैंगन के साथ झींगा. मैं नहीं खाऊंगा.
बैगन के साथ झींगा. Okay,
झींगा,
that's a
हाँ.
very strange combination.
Small aubergines,
हाँ,
and they put shrimps in that.
okay.
तो एक वो थे, एक सिंह साहब थे, एक सरकार साहब थे, और एक और मैं था. मैंने कहा खा तो लो. साफ उसने बोल दिया कि मैं नहीं खाऊंगा. Now that caused a big tremor. I said, you pass it on to me. You pass it on to me. So I told the gentleman in language, I said, I'll eat it, and you serve them something else, so as not to offend the people. So as we said, as you said, that we are a little culturally insensitive to culinary habits also. Hmm? We have to. And then at one place, he says, मैं ये नहीं खाऊंगा तो मुझे प्याज लाओ. So I said, okay, he wants an onion. I said, okay, onion. You ask for an onion, and sure enough, a very big onion with a knife and a fork came to him. कहता है तूने कहा. मैंने कहा जो आपने कहा मैंने कहा. कहता me and my big mouth. मैंने कहा और क्या चाहिए? मकई चाहिए, खीरा चाहिए, सब आ जाएगा. And they all came in that form. मैंने कहा आप छील के खाइए.
Good Lord.
So
Yeah,
होता है. These faux pas take place, and then we had, I think 6 years passed, and he had packed some puris and aloo from his घर 30-40. तो छठे दिन उन्होंने कहा कि we were going up by cable car to Mount Shan, this thing. तो आज इसको कहो कि मैं पूरी खिला रहा हूँ. मैंने कहा पहले मुझे खिला दो, कहीं इसका पेट खराब हो जाए
I
तो क्या
know.
होगा.
My God, 5-6 दिन की. Oof. My God. Yeah, true.
खाया मैम, खाया. क्या
And
करते हैं सब.
did you end up with food poisoning?
नहीं कुछ नहीं. That fellow was okay. He did have a little murmur, but he came back. He came back. But he was diplomatic enough not to refuse it. Now, for that penalty of not eating aubergine and shrimp, the leader of this company says, you will consume all the wine that there is. So when I thought that's a very red wine, 18 glasses I had to consume. So,
Wow.
and he had a good laugh.
And you survived that. Didn't
I
end up in
survived.
hospital.
I survived it, ma'am. I survived it, Sangeeta ji. But I had to, do it for them. तो ये आपकी बहुत अच्छी बात लगी. So I just want to share this with you. बाकी there's so much else to share on these jobs we had. Yes, English also is also very important with the Chinese. Because I was teaching these engineers Chinese, not English, through their language. Now it's become English is so important that even institutes like FDDI and Footwear Design Development Institute have these. plus they have Chinese also because the machinery comes from there. And then, yes, I did a course for McKinsey Knowledge Center, McKinsey, where I used to teach. I mean, their English was fine, because they were engineers, they were also IIM. It was a good experience, interacting with those bright sparks of life. And, it's a good experience. So that, आपका कुछ मिलता जुलता है, but grooming in these matters is very important. Culinary habits and cultural sense. अब पता नहीं है कि नहीं है, क्या है, we do not know. But we managed to control, contain most of the world and lose some close people also. This happens, I suppose. So, anyhow, Sangeeta, thank you so much for your time.
Thank
Dr.
you.
Natarajan, Dr.
for being
Natarajan,
with me.
bless
Yeah.
you. Thank you. Let's meet someday.
Pleasure talking to both of you.
And
Thank you. And
I want to bring my
wonderful
children
evening,
over.
and
I
we
want to
look
bring my
forward.
children
We,
over.
Yeah,
we will
absolutely.
coordinate